Today, we're going to dive into a prophecy from the book of Zechariah that is, well, it's both fascinating and honestly pretty terrifying. It's a story about how a nation's own leaders can become the very architects of its downfall, a prophecy of a people literally destined to devour themselves.
And that's really the big question we're tackling, isn't it? How could something written so long ago predict not just a nation's destruction, but the way it happens? We're not talking about an outside enemy here. We're talking about a nation that implodes, that eats itself from the inside out.
So, let's get right into it. Our journey begins in verse 7. Here, the prophet Zechariah gets a symbolic and frankly a really tough assignment. He's told to become a shepherd to what's called a flock of slaughter, basically a group of people who are already marked for judgment. So Zechariah takes on this shepherd role, and his main tools are these two staves or staffs. But look, these aren't just any old pieces of wood. Each one has a name with a powerful symbolic meaning. One is beauty, and the other is bands, and they represent the very foundation of the nation itself.
Okay, so let's break this down. The staff called beauty, that represents God's covenant with his people, his favor, his protection. The other staff, bands, well, that symbolizes the brotherhood, the national unity holding everyone together. So in a way, these two staves are the pillars holding up the entire nation.
But just as we get this picture of the nation's foundation, the tone of the prophecy takes a really dramatic turn. In the very next verse, the focus shifts from caring for the flock to a swift and incredibly severe judgment against its leaders. In a single month, 3 shepherds are cut off. And the language here is so strong. It talks about a mutual loathing, a deep disgust between the divine shepherd and these corrupt leaders. So the big question is, who exactly were these 3 shepherds? Well, scholars and historians have a couple of main interpretations. The first theory is that they represent the big religious and political groups of first-century Judea. You've got the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the civic rulers. The second, and more specific idea, points to 3 actual rival leaders, Eleazar, John, and Simon, whose constant infighting just ripped Jerusalem apart during the Roman siege. And we have to be clear about what cut off means here. This isn't just about being removed from power, like losing an election. The original language implies complete and total annihilation, to be destroyed so thoroughly that not a single trace of them is left. This is absolute judgment. And all of this leads us to the climax of the prophecy. After judging those corrupt shepherds, the divine shepherd makes this just shocking declaration. He's going to abandon the flock completely to its own fate. Man, this verse is just chilling. The protection is gone, the guidance is gone, the flock is just left to face death, destruction, and then there's that final, horrifying prediction that they'll turn on each other, literally consuming one another to survive.
Okay, so now let's shift from prophecy to actual history. How in the world was this grim prediction fulfilled? Well, the answer lies in the catastrophic siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, which was documented in vivid, terrible detail by the historian Josephus.
And this is the key. Josephus, who was an eyewitness to all this, tells us that Jerusalem actually had enough food stored to survive for years. But the warring factions inside the city, led by those very same shepherds, they systematically burned each other's food supplies. It's unbelievable. In their madness, they literally caused their own starvation, fulfilling that prophecy of self-destruction.
And that most disturbing line from the prophecy, it became a literal, horrific reality. The famine that the city's own leaders created grew so bad that, as Josephus writes, some people actually resorted to cannibalism just to survive. The city was truly eating itself alive.
The human cost was just staggering. Josephus estimates that over 1,100,000 people died during that siege. And that number was tragically high because so many pilgrims were trapped inside the city for Passover. It's an almost unimaginable scale of suffering, and it was brought about from within. So, you have to wonder, how did anyone make sense of this horror while it was happening? Well, the prophecy itself gives us a little clue. It points to a small group of people who actually understood what was going on. Right in the middle of all that chaos and collapse, the poor of the flock, the humble, the faithful, the ones who had paid attention to the warnings, they recognized what was happening. They didn't see it as some random tragedy. They knew it was the fulfillment of the word of the Lord. They saw the divine hand in the judgment that was unfolding.
And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about. I mean, the story of Zechariah 11 is an ancient one, for sure, but its warning feels timeless. It forces us to think about that profound and often devastating connection between the character of a nation's leadership and the ultimate fate of its people.